What is going on, YouTube? I'm working on 3 custom cars today. I have 3 1986 Chevy Monte Carlo Super Sports that I'll be working on. The plan is to make these look like some cars that you would have seen running in NASCAR in the 80s, and then ship them off to Sub4RA for his YouTube Cup NASCAR series. So the plan will be to add some weight, work on the wheels, and try and make these cars as fast as possible. So let's get started. Alright, first things first, we have to drill out the posts and get these cars torn apart. Luckily, I'll save you from the drilling part. I've already drilled them. I use a 9/64 drill bit to drill out the posts. 9/64 usually works pretty good. You just got to go really slow. But let's take these apart and see what we got. All of these came apart fairly easily. There is a pretty decent sized scratch in the window of the black one. I may be able to fix that. At least I'll give it a valiant effort. Looks like so far these are all made up the same. And the parts are actually pretty universal, which might come in handy if depending on what color paint schemes I want to go with these things. Alright, so our cars have been successfully disassembled. It is time to strip the paint. If you've seen some of my custom videos before, you know I use Citrus Strip Paint Stripper, and that's what I'm using again today on these. Typically, I'll sand the car a little bit before applying the paint stripper. It tends to work a little bit faster when I do that, but I didn't do that today. I'm just going to make sure I apply a nice thick coat to the whole surface of the car and let the paint stripper do its job. I have noticed though that after stripping the paint on some of these, I tend to get the paint sticking at the bottom corner panels. I don't know if that's just the way it sits in the pan and the paint stripper doesn't get there, but I'm making sure I get those areas very good. Once all the cars have a good amount of paint stripper on them, just time to let them sit. Let the paint stripper do its job, and usually I let them sit about 15 to 30 minutes. Alright, these are looking all nice and crusty, so let's get that paint off. Yeah, it looks like the citrus strip did its job. Everything's coming off. And just like that, I probably let this sit for about 30 minutes. All the paint's coming off pretty easily. Once I get most of the paint off, I'll wash it with some soap and warm water, and then go over it with some steel wool to make sure I get all the paint off. A couple of the cars had some casting issues, but this one was by far the worst. The area at the bottom of the rear window was jagged and wasn't even. So I grabbed my file and started working away, trying to smooth it out the best I could. Eventually I got it worn down and smoothed out pretty good. I also went along the front windows and the door windows to smooth it out and just make it kind of look uniform. After spending a little bit of time on that, it turned out pretty well, I think. All the cars are stripped down and ready for primer. I use Rust-Oleum Sandable Primer. It works pretty good, but if you guys have any suggestions for primer, I'd like to try a couple different ones. Starting with the green one, I'm going to do this one as a little tribute to Junior Johnson and his 1963 Chevy Impala. If you guys are a fan of racing history and racing legends, it doesn't get much bigger than Junior Johnson and the story behind his mystery motor in this 63 Chevy Impala. If you've seen some of my previous videos, you know I hate water slide decals, but I finally got some microset and microsol, so let's see how this works. As stated in the directions, it says to lay down the microset first, lay the decal over the microset, and then let it dry. So that's exactly what I did. Luckily, there's a seam that runs right down the center of the hood, right on the hood scoop, and I was able to lay the middle of that decal right on there, and it lined up just right. Once the decal was on, I used a wet paper towel to press it down. Do not do what I'm doing here and use your finger, because I did it on some of the other ones and it lifted the decal right off. So don't do what I did. Once the decal's pressed down pretty good and it's where you want it, just let it dry and then go over it with some microsol. The microset and the microsol will soften the plastic and it'll help the decal form to the body better than if you just use plain water. I would also recommend using a pretty soft brush when you do this, because if you use a stiff brush, it can move the decal while you're applying the microsol. I went over the decal with a good amount of microsol, and once it's all covered completely, you just sit and let it dry. And for my first time using microset and microsol, I was pretty happy with how that went on. So far, so good. And for the other decals, I just used the exact same steps. I put some microset on the area of the car that I wanted to place the decal. Placed the decal over the microset. Pushed it down with a wet paper towel so it would conform to all the seams of the body. And then I put the microsol on to help soften the plastic. And once done, it almost looks like it is painted on. I think it's pretty safe to say that I will never do another water slide decal without using microset and microsol. This stuff works fantastic, and you only need a small amount of it. I think between the 3 cars, I applied over 63 decals, and both bottles still look like they're just about full. So this stuff will last you a long, long time. And it's fairly cheap. You can find it on Amazon. And yeah, it's a very good product. I'm pretty impressed. And don't worry, I won't show you how I applied all 63 decals. The process is the same for all of them. I'm just showing you the first couple ones, just so you can have an idea how this stuff works and how I did it. Once we start moving along here, I'll just show you kind of where I applied the decals, and so you can see the cars kind of come together as the decals get put on them. As I started applying the decals to these cars, it was kind of interesting to me to see how the personality of the car started to come to light as a decal was placed on it, whether it be a number or a pinstriping. You could kind of see the personality of the car coming forward. You know, it just got a blank white canvas, and all of a sudden it's a race car sitting there. So that was kind of neat. I just enjoyed the process. So why am I using 1986 Chevy Monte Carlos as my car of choice in this little project? Well, I grew up in the 80s, and when I started getting interested in cars and racing, these were the cars that I saw screaming around the track. So a little bit of a nostalgia, and I guarantee that probably nobody else that's going to be entering any cars in this Sub 4RA YouTube Cup series is going to have any 86 Monte Carlos. So it's a little bit different. Brings me back to my good old days watching Dale Earnhardt and AJ Foyt and Bill Elliott and Rusty Wallace screaming around the track in these cars. And I thought it'd just be a fun little project. And it looks like the green car is done. My little tribute to Junior Johnson. I'm very happy with the way it turned out. All the decals went on incredibly well, and I'm very happy with this. Time to start working on the orange car. This car is from the 2012 Hot Wheel Performance Series. And I'm going to do my best to make it look like Bobby Allison's 1983 NASCAR Championship car, the Miller Lite number 22. This car was actually a Buick, but I don't have a Buick, so it's going to become a Chevy Monte Carlo. Some of you might be saying, who is Bobby Allison? Well, you probably know who he is because if you watched this last Daytona, you saw a video clip of him getting in a fight with Cale Yarborough at the Daytona 500 from 1979. He's the one not getting the good end of the deal on that one. But the Allisons have a long and actually pretty tragic history with racing and NASCAR. Bobby Allison is also the reason behind restrictor plates. In 1987 at Talladega, Allison crashed at over 200 miles an hour, and his car pretty much disintegrated, with pieces of his car flying into the grandstands and injuring several spectators. After that crash, NASCAR mandated smaller carburetors at Talladega and Daytona to finish out the 1987 season. The following season, they went to restrictor plates. I bet you didn't think you'd get a little NASCAR history lesson when you were watching this video, did you? Getting back to the matter at hand, the hood scoop on this car created a little bit of a challenge getting that decal on there, and I ended up having to cut it into 3 pieces to make it fit correctly. But it actually got on there, and it actually turned out pretty well. I must say I'm pretty impressed with this microsol and microset, and these decals I couldn't be happier with. Very impressed with these decals. Last but not least, time to start working on the black car. This car is from the 2015 Hot Wheels Workshop Muscle Mania series. And I'll try and do my best to recreate one of the most iconic cars in NASCAR history, the blue and yellow Wrangler number 3 car driven by the one and only Dale Earnhardt. I used Krylon Color Masters Sun Yellow and Krylon Color Masters True Blue for the paint on this car. The paint went on really well, and I was very pleased with the results. It was about 40 degrees outside when I painted this, so I had to warm up the paint cans before painting. I got a fairly large pot, ran it under the faucet until it got warm, and I put the paint cans in there. You don't want to get them too hot, and you don't want the water boiling. You just want it warm enough to where the paint loosens up and thins out a little bit. And it actually worked pretty well. These decals were a little bit different than the decals that I put on the other 2 cars. These decals were very thin and actually stuck onto the paper a lot better than the other decals. I actually ended up tearing a couple of these, and if you can't tell which ones I tore, then I guess I did an okay job of getting them on there. I'm sure some of you have probably noticed already, I kind of screwed up where I placed the Wrangler emblems on the rear quarter panel. They should be scooted up a little bit closer to the yellow and be centered on the top of the wheel well. By the time I realized this, I tried to move them and they just wouldn't move. I was scared I'd tear them if I messed around with them too much, so I just left them where they're at. They look alright. It's not 100% accurate, but I still think it looks pretty good. Of the 63 and some odd decals that I placed on these 3 cars, this top number 3 is the one that gave me the most problems. I got some air bubbles and some crinkles in it, and it just I got most of them out, and it turned out being okay. But it was a little bit of a task getting that on there. I ended up doing the same thing on this car that I did to the Miller car. I had to cut the hood decal into 3 different pieces due to the hood scoop, and then pieced them back together and tried to line them up as close as I could. It definitely wasn't easy getting those decals on there and getting them all lined up and trying to get them as even as possible, but I think I did a decent job of it, and I was happy with the way it turned out. Here we are with all the decals on it, and quite honestly, I couldn't be happier. The microsol, the decals, everything just worked fantastic, and I'm really pleased with how this turned out. It actually looks like a race car. Time to go racing. Once all the decals were dry, I used a Duplicolor clear coat to seal everything in, and once that was dry, it's time to put the cars back together. And I am sure you will notice that there are 2 different types of wheels on this Wrangler car. The front wheels do not match the rear wheels. That's because the original front wheels had a spur or a barb on there, and the wheels just wouldn't roll right. So I had to grab these and fix them up and get them on there. They were about the closest ones I could find. But again, this car is meant to go down the track and not sit in a display case, so I think it'll work for what I need. And when the day comes that this car's all done racing, I'll probably take the wheels out and switch them for probably some monoblock wheels to make it look better. So there we are. All the cars are put back together and ready to do some racing. These are probably some of my favorite customs that I've done so far. I just had a good time with this project, and it was fun seeing how the cars actually kind of came to life as you put more and more decals on it. So it's time to box them up and get them shipped over to Sub 4RA and the YouTube Cup, and hopefully they do well over there, and we'll see how they do. And if you haven't yet, head on over to Sub 4RA and check out his channel. He's got a lot of cool videos that he does, and he's pretty dang entertaining also. So these are just 3 of the cars that I'm going to be sending over to Sub 4RA. I actually have 2 more that I'm working on that will be going over there also, but those will be in a later video. If you guys are interested in picking up some decals for some customs that you got coming up, go check out RWNEFF1 on eBay. His decals are very high quality, and I'll leave a link down below so you can go check them out. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. And before I leave, I kind of hit a YouTube milestone, I guess you could call it. 150 subscribers. I'm totally blown away. I never expected to get 5 subscribers, let alone 150. So for me, that's a big deal. You guys are all a big deal to me, and I appreciate you guys watching and the comments you leave, and just everyone's so positive, and it's a great little community we got going here. And I gotta thank 3D Bot Maker and Rhino with Sub 4RA for pretty much, encouraging me to do this, and I'm just having a good time with it. I hope you guys are too, and thank you guys so much, and we'll see you on the next one.